Hello, friends, and welcome to the latest episode of Social Harmony, where today I'm joined by my new friend from Detroit, Joe Steagall. He is, amongst other things, host and creator of the Middleground Mic podcast, where it was this that drew me to him, that caused me to get in contact. The content that he put out, I felt really resonated, because I don't know about you, I feel a lot of fatigue to what I'm fed on my socials about what politics actually looks like. And we get these extreme viewpoints that the social media algorithm tends to reflect and reward. And I think for the most part, whether you agree or not, most of us are just getting through life, trying to make sure we pay our bills, look after our kids, and just, I don't know, make our corner of the world that bit more enjoyable and tidier. And a lot of what Joe does is he looks at the people like that, but also cuts out the bullshit and the hyperbole from it all. Takes out a lot of the extremities that just grate, that cause you a headache, and that cause a lot of us to just feel like it's end of days. And in this one, like, I've avoided a lot of political conversations up till now on the podcast, but I think the overreach that it has into our lives and the effect that it's having on our friendships, on our day to day, all of these things, I felt it was about necessary. And so, yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed talking to Joe several times in the lead up to this episode, and I like his knowledge. I always learn a lot from him, but it's just his calm nature and his willingness to just educate himself and just find out what's really happening under the hood of things. So, with that in mind, please, I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Thanks for listening. Hello, friends. Welcome to the latest episode of Social Harmony. Today, I'm doing my first political one. So today, I'm joined by Joe Steagall from Michigan. So what I'll do, Joe, if I could pass it over to you, brother, you introduce yourself. Tell us what you're about.
Hey, everybody. I'm Joe. I'm the host / creator of the Middleground Mic. A podcast where we always trying to find balance in everything that we do and that we talk about. We try to hear everybody's sides. Try to find, there's good people everywhere. You just got to find that balance, and you got to find those nuances, and how do we relate to one another and still agree to disagree, and going from there. It's a hard thing to do, and it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, surprisingly.
Yeah, I mean, this is one like I'm hoping to pick apart today with you, because I listened to your episode. There was one that you did. It said, "Stop calling people that you disagree with communists or Nazis," and that really resonated with me, because that's, I suppose, a cause for a lot of my frustration and just malaise with politics at the moment. In that you're either this end of the scale way up here, or you're this, and I'm neither. And I think for the most part, no, people are not. It's these extremes that represent neither of us. And I don't know about you, I just find it tiresome.
Yes, it is. The Nazi thing, what kills me is, and I get why some people feel that way, right? Because certain things that they see make them feel like, oh my God, that's this control factor, or it's hateful. But and they'll try to go too literal on the definition of fascist. Well, fascist was not exclusive to Nazis. Mussolini was a fascist, but he was not a Nazi. What was the guy from Spain? I'm drawing a blank on his name, but
Franco.
Franco. Yes, he was a fascist as well, but was not a Nazi. But people tend to oversimplify it, and I believe 6 million Jews. Now there's reports of 4 million. I don't know that were killed, but you're minimizing all that stuff, whether you agree with what's happening or not. At least in my neck of the woods, I don't see people getting carted and halted off to, camps where they're getting massively killed.
Yeah.
And that's
I
where I
think
draw
that's
the
it. Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose from my view, Nazis have been sort of elevated to this status of ultimate evil.
Yes.
Therefore, just conflating again, like let's see, you know, you don't like Donald Trump and his use of ICE, therefore Nazi. Taking Orange Man bad to an extreme degree because he represents things that you don't like and is therefore being made out as this, yeah, this vision of evil. And I do think, like you rightly say, it just minimizes what fascism is in and of itself as a concept, but also those who suffered underneath it.
Yes. And that's, and the, I won't say like the worst part, but the odd part is communism has actually killed more people than fascism.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe Joseph Stalin alone, just him, not including everybody else that ran Soviet Russia, just him alone, I believe it was like 40 to 60 million people. I can't remember the exact number. And you just don't hear that outrage about that. And it's because some people tend to favor communism because they have this mentality that everybody would just be happy if everything was equal. Well, let's look at real communist societies that have done nothing's equal. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. Soviet Russia, it didn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, China is pseudo communist capitalist and even there they've got massive homeless rates despite being one of the bigger economies in the world. It's not equal. And communism and fascism really rely on everybody being okay with what they're told they're allowed to have and do. And that's just not human nature.
No. Not unless, and this is where again I struggle with I suppose what we get fed through our algorithms and whatnot, as though you got to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs in, I suppose, being a good person. Like when I struggle with, if I can strip it back, this idea that those on the left of centre are aligned with compassion, as though it's, I suppose, something that just fits. If you're left of centre, you are compassionate, you are caring, you are this. So therefore, you will subscribe to these political views. Whereas on the other side, if you are more conservative and what have you, you are not compassionate and you are this, 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 this. And there seems to be never the twain shall meet. More so now in our social media age, because I suppose this is the economy we're in. That's the clicks and likes and the quick grab, the short form video that takes your attention. But you pick apart some of it. Some of the, like we were talking before we recorded, the mental gymnastics to align with this. And this is what I see a lot in the videos that I'm watching. And I suppose something that Charlie Kirk was very good at. Now, he held his particular views, which I agree with some, I don't agree with all. But one I did like is he would break things down into their component parts, which that's the thing I feel has often been lost in, I don't know necessarily whether in a modern political landscape, but for the most of the people that you talk to about it, they don't seem to look that deeply. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? And what is it like boots on the ground in America?
It's hard because a lot of it is so based around fear. And fear is what drives a lot of it. And I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. The fear drives it, and then when you get people like Charlie Kirk, some folks, I'm sure you've seen the videos, some folks just come up there. I mean, Charlie could sit there and be like, I agree with you. And because they already come with this preconceived notion of, I already hate this guy.
Yeah.
They're just going to hate him no matter what. And, schools used to be about teaching you about openness and trying to think. Well, now, from what I see, it's been a long time since I've been to school. What I see videos posted, and I'm sure not all schools are like this, but some of them tell you that if you don't think as I do in college, you're bad. And, some of these political science classes would be like, you have to think this way. This is how things go. Everything else is bad. It's either unconstitutional or it's evil. And to me, the teacher shouldn't be there being the one to tell you about morality. The teacher should be there teaching you how to find your own morality based on what your core beliefs are. And when you say something like that, people go, fascist, Nazi. And you're like, what? I'm just telling you to believe in what you believe. Like they're so wanting to be told. Just for instance, the Daily Caller the other day put out that there was a group, and I'm not going to put it out there because I don't know like the super details, but we're funding, well, not funding, but paying to organize some of the protests in Minneapolis.
Right.
And when I think I had told you about one of my episodes, I had kind of really learned about that. And, and I went on the, some other news sites, and people, because it's their side that's doing it, they're like, that's not true. We really believe in what we believe in. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, when Biden was in office, Republicans felt the same way. And I'm like, and I put on there and I'll comment, hey, I've actually talked to the CEO of one of the biggest companies that does this. And no, you're actually being paid to be told to be mad, and you're buying into it. For like instance, the ICE situation in America. And they could handle things a lot better. It's gotten a little too far in some situations. But ICE got created in 2003. There's a state representative, a U.S. House representative in Michigan. Her name's Rashida Tlaib, very controversial, borderline. But she goes, she's a Democrat, and she goes, well, in 2010, I asked Barack Obama to stop having ICE snatch kids out of schools and funerals. So I'm going, well, where was the outrage before now? They've been doing this, and I tell people, I'm like, they've been doing this. You're only mad now because you're being told to be mad. Oh, no, that's not true. I truly care about this. Yes, you do truly care about that because you're getting pushed. It's getting pushed on you. But realize that if somebody else was in office, they would not be this clear and upfront with you. They would be hiding it. Barack Obama's name was Deporter in Chief. And that's where Charlie Kirk would try to talk about things like that, right? He'd be like, hey, this bad thing has been happening even before this. We have to figure out how to get this done together. And people say, like, oh, racist, fascist, Nazi, you want to see women. And it's like, okay, I'm a patient man, very patient, but he is, was far more patient man than I will ever be.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've touched upon a lot of subjects there. I mean, again, the schools thing, because I'm not in there, I can't speak to it. I don't want to buy into alarmism that people say, but I do feel that there is some truth in it, that insofar as, there is a certain belief system in, I don't know what the word would be, but certain trades, certain roles in, job roles or whatever, where it's more of a left of centre operating system, let's say. But I think the wider thing being, you said, it's for you to find who you are, what's your moral code, and people are too willing to outsource that. Whether it's parents are too willing to hand over, this is my child, right? You can deal with them, you can do all this, rather than taking an active role in it, is one thing. But otherwise as well, people as individuals not willing to actually learn about things. They'll take what they see on face value. I mean, I remember I had a very important conversation to mine, I still remember it, with my daughter. This was around the time of Trump's first election, when he was running for president. And she would be, I think at the time, about 11 years old. And so we were just sat having a conversation, and she went, oh, I hate Donald Trump. I said, well, why? Well, he's horrible, isn't he? And I think this is where the, grab him by the pussy things were being pushed. You know what I mean? This is it. And there was very much that, orange man bad kind of thing going around, And again, I said to her, I says, well, please, can I ask, look at why, whether I agree with the word hate or whatever as your parent, I'm not sure about that, but understand why. Don't just buy into, oh, he's horrible because everybody says so, or because those in your circle say so, who also are either ignorant or ill-informed, you know. And I'll say, like, myself, I'm not saying I'm a Trump supporter or whatever, but there's nuance to this. There's looking at, all right, well, these things have gone well. I'm not really
Yes.
sure about this, whatever it is. And I've heard, again, different conversations. Like, I've spoken to American friends, to UK friends, and what have you. The way Trump is portrayed in media in different countries is very different. I think, to a lot of, I think in the US, you'll probably get a broader picture because he's your president. And you'll get both, left leaning and right leaning outlets pushing what's there. But ultimately, for me, you don't get to the level of president without having something about you. And Trump, whether you like him or not, was a big figure before he became president.
Yes.
So can we look at these rather than this current trend for wanting to be in some in-group, whether it's, left or right, whichever, but abandoning critical thought before you step in. I mean, that probably sounds like a big concept.
No.
I'm hearing it, but yeah, that's my feeling on what I'm seeing a lot at the moment. Again, the videos and what have you that come through this thing, it's that.
Oh God, I know.
It's very clip to fit. And there was a thing, again, you might have heard, the BBC got sued by Trump because
Oh
they
yeah.
edited the video clip to make it look like he was going along with certain things, whereas the actual video was very different. And this is
Yes.
the national broadcaster. This. I don't live there. Like I said, I've not lived in the UK for like 16 years now. But the BBC was something we grew up with. It was, it was one of the pillars of our society. So to now see what it's become based on, I don't even want to use the phrase political correctness because that's to me wrong. It is, I don't know, a certain set of beliefs that a particular group has said you must ascribe to, otherwise you are, well, you are fascist, as it were, as a catch-all term.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Well, I definitely see how Donald Trump is perceived overseas, and from what I can see here, right? And I know like there's some countries that really like him, there's some countries that probably more that don't like him than do like him. His big thing is, and I used to be a little bit more in this camp, but over the years I've kind of moved to the center. Is if you're saying screw America, we don't need America, all these type of things, why in God's name are we giving you money and weapons?
Yeah.
Like if you hate us so much, stand on your own 2 feet and make it happen. And I kind of like, okay, then now that I've grown up a little bit, I kind of see, okay, well, there's some nuances in between all that, right? And sometimes it may be the leader of that country that's saying that, but the rest of the country doesn't support it. And Donald Trump being more of an isolationist in a lot of aspects, especially with foreign aid, right? He's very limited on who he wants to give it to. That doesn't sit well with the rest of the world because they're kind of used to America stepping in, doing certain things, pushing things a certain kind of way. And that's where, a lot of people get upset. I think, God, one of the countries in Africa, they were, the USAID was giving aid to study, I believe it's gender studies and the effect on certain animals in the atmosphere. And it's like, what? This has nothing to do with America. This has nothing to do with aid to help these people. And then you see some groups where this money gets funneled to. Well, the group never actually was there. It was just a group that somebody created and then the money magically vanished.
Yeah.
So, that's corruption. And, and here's the thing. I know, oh, well, we're going after both sides really do it. And, the problem is for Donald Trump is he really only goes after the Democrats rather than going after everybody like he kind of promised.
Yeah.
And that's where he kind of gets himself in trouble, right? Because he needs those Republicans to get things done. So he doesn't focus on them as much. But where I think he's missing is if he would have really pushed that, no matter who the person is, he would have got so many more people that were MAGA elected than he did now. He would have been able to gut all of it. But I mean, I get it. Hindsight's always 20/20. And that's why I think a lot of people don't like him. And, and then he does things like what he did. Yeah. Well, they said it was a low level campaign staffer or, White House staffer that shared a very controversial video that called Michelle and Barack Obama, depicted them as,
yes,
the apes
I
or
saw
monkeys or
this,
whatever.
yes.
And I'm like, when I seen that, I was just like, man, if there was ever a dumb move, if there was one, that was it was not appropriate. No matter how you feel about the Obamas, it was just we all got to be better than that.
No, I did see that video a few times over the last couple of days, and I just remember thinking, on no level is this a good thing. I don't know whether Trump himself shared it or whatever, but that I don't know how that would get through. But yeah, I mean, I take your point. What I actually do like about a lot of his rhetoric, and again, I haven't dug too deep in there, but he does seem to be putting American interests as a whole first. Which,
yes,
I suppose this though is where the conflict is, in that you want to see, wealthy countries and what have you being benevolent, but I suppose at the same token, you've got such a massive homeless problem in so many parts of the country. For just one example.
Oh my gosh, it is awful.
So it's, what was it in San Francisco? I've seen, the Tenderloin. I think that's where it is, where there's these massive homeless villages. And that's where, just as a simplistic thing, why are you giving money to X, Y, and Z for things when the people in your own country are living so, in such a fashion that shouldn't even be a thing. So I can understand where that aspect, I don't know, that's what I'm saying. There's so much nuance to it that's difficult and conflicting. But I don't even just want to say social media landscape, because it looks like I'm blaming everything on the socials. But the way we seem to be at the moment is you've got to give a quick answer. And the problem, like that homelessness issue, even just in that issue, it's not a quick answer. But people are defining their identity and their political beliefs on the quick answer. And I think this is one, I don't know what your view is, but we were talking earlier about Zohran Mamdani. And so New York has a lot of problems. There's a lot of people who are seeing, I haven't got anything. And so when somebody comes in and says, right, I'm going to make your rail fares obsolete, I'm going to bring down rents, we're all going to be equal on this score, it's a very attractive proposition. So, I mean, we've gone through, say, from Trump, what the Republican aspect might be, but the far Democrat aspect, I'm saying, well, further than Democrat. And these are, I suppose, some of the people we were talking around earlier on at either extremes. I mean, what does that look like from inside to you guys?
Well, I'm trying to think of maybe the best way. Which part are you talking about? How it looks to us? Because I want to make sure I give you the correct answer.
Okay, right. I suppose as somebody living outside of the US, we get a slanted picture of Mamdani. I suppose his ethnic background is one thing that's trumped up. The fact that he looks like a champagne socialist. He's come from very wealthy means. However, he is advocating for, this, flattening of the curve in all ways. But I suppose, like I said, the social media landscape rewards extremes. So you're going to get extreme viewpoints on either side, and very little of the middle ground is transmitted across.
Yeah. Well, you know, with Mom Donnie, it's where, you know, obviously people who are not supporters of him, obviously they're critical of the tax aspect. And some of the people he's kind of appointed, I believe one lady said that, you know, there should be a special tax on white people.
Mm.
You know, he has another lady that says there's, you know, home ownership. It should be more spread out and more of like co-ops type of thing. You know, and then he talks about, the free bus fares, but he leaves out that significant wait time increases.
Mm.
But people hear free and they
Yeah.
think that it's actually free. Well, now he comes into office and all of a sudden all these things he wants to do. I believe New York City's facing like a $12 billion deficit. I don't know. I'm pretty sure that's the number, but I could be wrong. So don't crucify me, people. But you know, and that's where people are very critical of him. There was a video that circulated that's been kind of going around where, and he's proposed this out loud, that the businesses and the rich people that are, well, mainly the businesses that want to leave New York City, they're going to make a law that doesn't let them leave. And if they do want to leave, they're going to keep their assets. And it's like, what? First off, that's illegal. You can't do that. Like literally, you can't, unless you're seizing them for illegal activities. You don't have the legal authority to do that. But then they had a voter or a supporter talking about it, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna keep their stuff, and we're gonna keep that. We're gonna make it illegal. The mayor's gonna make it illegal for them to leave. And it's like, you know, this is America where you can't do things like that. Like literally, like you have no avenue to even do it. There's no you know, and I believe the guy was even saying, oh, there could be an executive order issued. And people are just so delusional because they want to believe in what he says so bad. I had done an episode on my kind of did like 20 true, false, or facts, you know, and a lot of what he's trying to do, there is some factuality behind it where in isolated cases it can work. But in a very hyper capitalist city like New York City, where you have so many big businesses, you're going to collapse the city's foundation from underneath it, and the money's going to vanish. California, prime example. All he needs to do is look at California. And if you don't think California ever thought about, well, if we can make it illegal for them to leave, we would, you know, because so many billionaires and companies are just fleeing that state because there was, and ironically, Gavin Newsom, the very liberal governor there, the state legislature was proposing a 5% one-time wealth tax on everybody that was worth over a certain amount of money, like billionaires and millionaires. And as soon as that happened, a bunch of them started announcing, yep, we're out of here. We're out of here. We're out of here. And then when it went to his desk, he kind of, you know, put the kibosh on it.
Yeah. No, these are the, I mean, California is a separate entity for me because, yeah, I've been sort of paying a bit of attention to that. Like I listened to it. It was actually Charlie Kirk and Gavin Newsom having a conversation. Now, he comes across as very slick, very charismatic. Newsom, I mean. But, yeah, I mean, there's so many things, again, that I'm seeing snippets of from the outside. Now, and also, like, I remember I visited California when I was, 15. We had family over there. Still do. And it was like paradise to me. You know, I mean, bear in mind, this is, you know, a young working class kid from the north of England. And then I was, you know, on these gorgeous beaches, I was seeing, well, I suppose the American dream, if you like. It was a world apart for me. I absolutely loved it. And then what I'm seeing coming out of California nowadays, and this is just regular people, this is not even the extremes, but they're saying, you know, how difficult it is to live there nowadays. It's so far apart from the picture I have in my head. Like you rightly said, I suppose, yeah, you would have asked many Californians, however many years back, can it ever lead to this? And they would have said no, I'm guessing. But it's progressively got to this stage now. I can't begin to pick apart how it's come to such a state that it's in at the moment. And
California specifically?
Well, that's what I'm using as a frame of reference, because I suppose, again, America being so very, very vast, there's so much difference within it. So there's certain, you know, certain reference points, A, that I have personally or that I've formed a view of through media. So
Mhm.
I would have no idea of Boise, Idaho as a concept because I know
Right.
nothing about it. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, again, I'll
Okay.
say
Yeah.
California, I'll use that as some big catch all, even though San Francisco, very different to Solvang, very different to Los Angeles, you know? But yeah, I suppose I have got some affinity with that. I suppose ditto New York, we know what it's about. And
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The California thing just does puzzle me because it struck me as such an ideal place in a lot of ways that now I I I would never think of going living there, and that saddens me.
No, I mean it's really bad. There's some cities, and I know San Francisco's pretty bad. Um, I'm trying to think of the other one. Maybe I'm thinking of San Diego, where they have like these massive, essentially like tent cities, right? Where it's just
Mm,
like just tents everywhere, and so many poor people. And I believe outside of LA, there's actually somewhere where there is it's kind of like a city in the desert type of thing where they got like all these RVs and like
mm,
abandoned buses and stuff, and they have them set up like little neighborhoods, and it's like there's no cops, there's no government. It's just like
mm,
this lawless thing, and that's how bad it is in California because it's so expensive to live. And California, so some things that California does don't make any sense. Like they pass what they call a fast food minimum wage of
mm.
like $20 an hour, and then a bunch of fast foods close, but it doesn't apply to small mom and pop businesses, and it doesn't apply to the minimum wage overall in California, just fast food. And it's like, if you're going to have that, you kind of got to make it universal so the whole economy can adjust. You're going
Mm.
to lose jobs, but it was more targeted at a specific industry.
Yeah.
And that's the things that California does that kind of, to me, shoots itself in the foot. And
Mm.
then they're kind of scratching your head. So they've got this massive, homeless population. Well, when you're paying, I think in San Diego, a one bedroom apartment in some parts are like $3,500 a month. It's
Mm.
like, I mean, $20 an hour, you can't afford that. You'd have to
Yeah.
have like 5 people living there at $20 an hour to even attempt to make that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems one. I mean, I heard a comment on something not so long ago, and it was saying in American politics, and this seems like a good example of it. The majority of politicians are lawyers. They've got a legal background. So therefore, they will, think, all right, there's a problem. I'll use legislation to figure it out. And they end up more and more and more and more red tape. I suppose, like you're saying then about a fast food tax. All right, so America may have an issue with obesity. So therefore, we put tax on fast food. That kind of thinking, that one step. Whereas this guy I was listening to, he said China tends to have more of their politicians be engineers. So they'll look for solutions rather than legislative. And it seems, and again, this is just a lay opinion, it's not backed up by fact, but it sounds to me that's what California have done. Just piled law on top of law, etc., etc. So they're in such a state where you just cannot move for red tape. And I don't know, is that what it looks like?
Yeah,
Wow.
no, I mean, very much so. It is very much. That's exactly what it looks like. You know, the red tape is always definitely a huge obstacle. So I can specifically say to something that I know is in Detroit. Um, for instance, you need a permit to run a hot dog stand.
Hmm.
And the guys behind it is, well, we want to make sure that they're serving safe food.
Hmm.
I have yet to see very many people going out there to check to see if that hot dog stand is cooking hot dogs right.
Hmm.
And the chances are, even if you do go there one time or once a year to inspect it, the 300 and something other days a year that you're not there as an inspector, certain things, yes, you do need you should have to have some kind of license, but a hot dog stand and that license, can be hundreds of dollars at a time.
Hmm.
And if you're just a small guy trying to make a living, that hundreds of dollars could be the difference between you opening it up and you giving up on your dream because you have limited funds.
Hmm.
And people forget that back in the day, quote unquote, 100 years ago, a lot of these small companies got started and they didn't have these obstacles that turned into conglomerates. You didn't have they had to, pay business taxes or whatever, but they didn't have these massive, regulatory hurdles just to open up a small hamburger shop.
Yeah. No, this is a thing I see. I'm just thought if I can pull it back to a middle ground view, as it were. We've talked about extremes of politics and thus far. Can I ask, well, you say you're the middle ground, Mike. What does that look like to you? What's your thinking on that? I've segued quite drastically from one topic to another, but I'm just keen to find out what it looks like.
So, to me, a middle ground area would be like you have to look at things on a per issue basis. Right? It's very hard because with America being so complex, smaller countries, things like that, countries that are a little bit more of a nationalized government, you can do maybe more of a flat system. But in America, what hits the hot dog stand in Michigan may not work for a hot dog stand down in Missouri. Because we're so different, the eating habits of people in Michigan are going to be vastly different than California. Vegan's very popular. You do have a vegan scene here in Michigan, but it's not the same. And that's kind of where you got to find that balance, right? So Michigan, we have a 6% sales tax. The governor here wanted to at one point raise the Michigan gas tax so high, but because of how she wanted to do it, the voters voted it down. Well, then with the budget, they kind of changed the gas tax around, and now it's more just a percentage tax rather than a flat tax. And they could do that because we eliminated the gas tax, but they applied the sales tax to it, which gets them more money. So they kind of circumvented the voter, and where I find a middle ground is, you have to look at it, and conservatives have to realize that there's certain things, especially when it comes to like education, childcare, that even a lot of moderate conservatives want. They want something to help lower end people out. But liberals also have to realize there's certain things that conservatives don't want to do that they kind of maybe have to meet them in the middle on, going, okay, well, we may want daycare for everybody, but this tax got paid. How can we apply this so that it's more balanced, but we can provide people with the things that they need? So just give you an instance, I have somebody that I know, she just put her 4 or 5 month old daughter in daycare. She's a single mom. She's paying $1,300 a month.
Wow.
That's insanity. Right. And, but here's the problem in America. When you tend to give government aid, like, okay, hey, we're going to help that single mom out no matter what. Well, now all these centers are going to be like, whoop, we're going to jack the price up sky high. And then when you go to say, hey, we can't be doing that, they're going to go, oh, well, without that aid, we're going to have to shut down. Not even taking into account, well, before that aid, you were doing just fine. And that's kind of where that balance comes in, where each side will try to push its agenda so that way they can go, they can tout it to their base. And then what gets lost in the sauce is the people who truly need the aid. And so you got to find that. So like here in Michigan, rather than raising people's income tax, they had to balance the budget. They increased a lot of funding for K through 12 education here. It's kindergarten through, essentially the end of high school. They went after what they used to call back in the day sin taxes. So, recreational marijuana is legal in Michigan. So they increased it from 17% to 24%. Well, that was actually done at the wholesale level. So you're going to see higher price on the product, but you're not going to see that tax when you purchase the product. You're still going to see, that 17% tax that was there to begin with, but they had a tax in the wholesale. They raised it to 24%, which I guess that I would be okay with because you make an active choice to buy that product. It's not something that you have to live. And I said, okay, to me, that's a middle ground because it's something that we make a choice to use recreationally. It's not something that I know that fast food's considered not needed, right? But sometimes that's all some people either A, have the money for or the time for, So it's not targeting things like that. So I'm going, okay, that's a balance. It helps fund the bills, helps get things paid for, and it's not being shoved down people's throats.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's to me that's a good example of, I suppose, looking at the bigger picture. And like we were talking earlier on, these snap judgments and what have you, I think the danger of it is where something like that, something that sounds good as a soundbite, and just,
Yes.
right, yeah, I'm voting on the strength of that, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. Like you talk about your friend there. I mean, I suppose, yeah, free or subsidized childcare as a phrase sounds very attractive. But then you scratch deeper, it's not free. What is it subsidized by? And again, I suppose, yeah, like we're saying, the corruption that can come of it when it's come unchecked, it's just done without great thought and without,
Yes.
I suppose, the necessary oversight, for want of a better phrase. And these are the kind of things where, like I say, I find it very dangerous that people are just not paying attention. They're not willing to just look, even, give something a cursory glance. And that's, yeah, this is part of my frustration with politics in general, not in and of itself because it's a necessary thing, but the way it's packaged to people and the way that they respond and how people, air quotes, get their knowledge is quite a scary prospect to me.
Oh, it
And
is. Significantly, it is. I mean, it's awful.
yeah, and
It's awful.
Yeah, this is why, again, I try and educate myself. And again, there's always the danger of, you look where your sources are coming from. I might be given bomb information, and there's always bad actors in any sphere of life. But I do try, and I try to sort of give my kids little bits of education on it as well, and just sort of say, get involved, pay attention. And this is where, I suppose, yeah, I would say myself a centrist on that score, in that I can look at both sides of a political argument and pick the bits out that I think resonate or that make sense to me. I mean, we spoke, a couple of times now before recording, this idea of contrarian politics that we see so much at the moment is, again, a danger, in that, for those of you out there listening, what we were talking about is the fact that a Democrat can come up with a good idea and a Republican will just say, no, that's bullshit, just because it doesn't toe a party line. Whereas I feel, and I'm sure you do as well, that this doesn't represent what I'm about. My thing is, whether left or right, we worry about the same things. Whether your kids have got a good education, whether there's housing, whether there's safe communities and what have you. And this pointless point scoring on either side either just gets in the way or just pushes the issues out of the window entirely. And so for this, I don't know, this is why I've sort of said I'm proudly centrist on this kind of thing, because I'll look at both sides. And this is what resonates so much with a lot of your podcast episodes for me. The fact that you're taking the time and the effort to look at both and put arguments forward for both. I mean, would that be a fair assessment of your work and how you see it?
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. 1,000%. I'm very, very big on, because here's the thing, right? Next week, like next week, it could change, right? So you got to be willing to change with it. Like you have to be willing to go, okay, that tax didn't work. It skyrocketed the childcare costs, or really took this off the rails. You have to be willing to go, okay, well, yeah, it didn't work. Let's try something else. Whereas right now, it's that we're going to double down on it, no matter who it is. If that politician push it, we're like in America, the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, for, whenever they shut the government down for 2 months over it. And I'd put out a thing, people are going, oh, it's over the subsidies. It's over the subsidies. Well, first, no, it was over the election because both parties were trying to play it to their advantage. Democrats were trying to say the Republicans are trying to put you out on the street with your health care. Republicans are trying to say Democrats are trying to screw you over. But I had said first, it's about the election because not even a week after the election, guess what? They came up with a continuing resolution to open the government as is. And they were proposing that multiple times before the election, but it was like, so the big thing is in America, we have a problem with cost of healthcare, not access. Politicians love to use the phrase access. And this is why I say everybody's got to be willing to change. The Affordable Care Act in concept was not a terrible idea, but it's something that's more practical when it's done at a state level, not the federal government. And just looking at it financially, it's pretty common sense to see the rates just keep skyrocketing. What the government's paying for it. Well, the government, Republicans nor Democrats, have done anything to address the real issue, the cost. All they ever talk about is we're going to subsidize what we think you need. Each one does it differently. Republicans want to subsidize certain products. Democrats want to subsidize certain services. It's like, why don't we get back to the root cause of the problem is why the F is it so hard to afford health insurance? Like, where do we fix it? In America, one of the big things you could do is go after the administrative costs. Compared to the next highest industrialized nation, America, I believe it's like 13,000, and then you drop down to 7,000, and the next highest, I believe it's an administrative and overall cost, is Germany. It's over 50% lower. I think we're in that ballpark. But yet they won't do that in America because they're like, well, you need a gajillion checks and balances just to make sure everything's perfect. But then you turn on the news 2 weeks later and you see, well, this doctor scammed the federal government out of $30 million in false things. And it's going, obviously the checks and balance doesn't do its job. All it is a waste of money. And somebody who is really not worth their weight in gold, not as a human, but as a position, it's not effective. But people will not deviate from it because the minute you deviate from it, you're deviating from your position.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, another one I feel in politics today, and I'd be interested in your take, this feelings over facts way of going about things. Like we see a lot, we were talking earlier on, the cognitive dissonance needed to make certain things go. And I don't know, I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with this. I do really just want to hear your take on it. That's another thing. For me, politicians growing up were always sort of, I suppose, drab guys in suits. You might get the odd one, but it was to get a job done. Whereas nowadays, people look to the government as some sort of either panacea for all ills or the source of all those ills. And it's, I don't know, all the placards and all the posturing, all the sanctimonious theatrics and what have you, seems to me to get in the way of what somebody's actually there to do. I suppose that's quite a broad thing I'm throwing on the table there. But I mean, I suppose seeing what it's like in America, and I don't know, you guys, you're more like outward speaking, more, the big talk and what have you. How does it look, and how do you think we got here?
We got here through, especially in America, I can speak on, is the eroding of, I don't want to sound cliche, but the family household. There's, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be that person who's like, oh, mom's got to stay at home, raise the kids. No, just whoever, anybody, even in the 90s, if mom and dad worked, grandma or somebody was available to just be with you all day and kind of keep an eye, even the neighbor. Whereas that's kind of gone now, where during the day, you're like, if a couple of your neighbors are home, everybody else is at work and it's quiet. You don't see very many kids running down the street and those things. And then so much technology has removed that ability to interact with one another, right? Like you learn those You learn those little nuances of a person when you're talking to them, and you're seeing those little, like when I say, hey, you're ugly, you stupid guy, and you're like, ah, ha, ha, like those kind of little nuances that,
Yeah.
like we had when we were younger are not there now because
Yeah.
somebody says that now online, and it's, I'm going to come to your house and off you, and, they dox you, and FBI agents and the sheriffs are showing up at your door like you're a crack dealer.
Yeah.
That's what's happening now, and that removes that ability to relate to one another, because whether you're a liberal, a Democrat, a far right extremist, far left extremist, we still drink the same cup of water. We still eat beef from the same providers generally. And we've lost that fact to remember that. And we can't, because if you say, well, we get the meat from the same person. Well, yeah, but your regulations are making it do this, this, and this. Well, yeah, but that's what it literally devolves into, that, rather than going, well, yeah, man, we're really both eating something that's real bad. Like, they can't even see that because they're so convinced, because they don't really know the person next door. Like, half the time, people barely even know their next door neighbor. When I was growing up as a kid, my next door neighbor, I remember his name was Dave, or David, one of them. And I've always been a curious person. He would talk to me about outer space. I had no idea about his politics, but this guy taught me the speed of light. When this stuff was going on, I knew him as a person.
Yeah.
My other neighbor, he knew that I was like 12, 13 years old, and he was like, you're kind of a lazy butt. You need to get off your butt and work. So I kind of dodged it a little bit. And then one day my dad comes in the house and goes, hey, Carrie, the next door neighbor, he wants you to go deliver firewood with him in the afternoon. It was like right before Y2K. And, everybody was stocking up on firewood to prepare for the lights going out. And, and then I kind of got to know him on a personal level, and we became so close that, if he seen I didn't feel good, hey, he'd be like, hey, come on over here, have a Coke, it'll settle your stomach. Yeah. Things like that. Those things are gone now, to where if your neighbor did that now, people would be like, oh, man, you better get that checked out. He's trying to kill you, or he's drugging it. Like, not that things like that didn't happen back then.
No,
but now we've lost
such a low trust environment nowadays, though, aren't we?
Yes, and that's where the disagreement in politics crosses over, because now you have so little value in a human you don't know, that it automatically creates that atmosphere. And I always try to always see the good, or at least a neutral, in a person that I don't know. Sometimes I'll even admit I'm a human being. Sometimes when I see certain things, I'm looking at something, I'm like, Jesus, man. But I always try to remember, to a degree, like, okay, maybe there's more to it. I try, but I'm just like anybody else. I have those knee jerk, like, oh my gods. But I always try to go, okay, take a step back. Let's try to remember. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, I suppose, coming back to before, there's so many layered stages, whereas we want the easy answer. What's the problem? Oh, it's this. All right, that, as you've just highlighted there, like you said, the breakdown of the modern family. Now, I suppose you could argue several things for this. Is it capitalism forcing both parents to work? Is it the feminist movement that says women should not be shackled to the house? And is it all these other things? And again, I don't know what the answer is. But my suggestion would be a multiplicity of things that have all chipped away at what we did have to what we now have. And the socials, I'm very much on board with that. I don't know if you've seen that Mike Tyson said something about it. He says that social media's took away that thinking that you'll be punched in the mouth. I can't remember the exact wording of it. It says, but back in the day.
There's sometimes how some people talk on social media, and I'm like, man, I swear to gosh, if you were in front of me, I would, it just, you get that feeling in your heart, even though you don't want to, because how social media affects you, it puts it in there, right? And that's just how it is. But it's just, I view it like anything else in life. How, like, you and I grew up in a different era. We grew up in an analog era that transitioned to digital. So we still had that level of teaching, of learning to try to control ourselves, that helped us do that transition better. Whereas the younger crowd doesn't have that. kind of getting back to the how we became so divided, and it really just popped in my head, is I remember there was a lady that was kind of kitty cornered in my house growing up, and they were like landlords, and they owned a couple houses on the block, and people rented from them. But the wife was the husband, I forget his name, but they were really good people. He was always nice, but the wife she would bake cookies and then just go outside and see the kids running around. She'd just be like, hey, who wants some cookies? And she kind of always talked to the other parents, even though her kids were all grown up, moved out. She would always talk to the other parents, so it wasn't so awkward, right? But she would always walk outside like, hey, who wants cookies? And I'd be like, man, her cookies are the bomb. I would look at my dad and be like, listen, I know you're a good cook, man, but her cookies are awesome. See you later. Adios. I'm going over to across the street to grab them. And, and it was just like that. You had that openness and that willing to accept your neighbor. Back then, I'm not going to lie, I had no idea what their politics were. Whereas now at 7 years old, you probably have an idea of what your neighbor's politics are and why you should not like them. And that's just so insane. I know you're from across the pond per se, but in America, I'm sure you know who Ronald Reagan is.
Yes.
Well, the Speaker of the House early in his tenure his name was Tip O'Neill. And he was a Democrat. Reagan was a Republican. Vast political enemies / opposites. I mean, Tip O'Neill and Reagan would both rail against each other half the time. But I believe it was once a week or a couple times a month, they would have dinner together and have a beer. And even though they were like that, they were able to get things done, even in a polarized situation, because they understood who each other were as humans / men. And because they understood that, they realized, okay, there's certain areas where we can find that little nuance, that little crevice, so we can make some progress to move other things forward. And those things are so critical. Just like I'm sure you've seen on news things, like facial expressions or body language, and people are on like TV, right? And they'll be like, well, this is how this person, because you see those things, and that's how that person's truly feeling about it. But when you're with that person, like in person, it's like the energy comes off differently. And I think that social media and not talking to your neighbor really impact that. Not saying social media shouldn't be there, because it's enabled me and you to do things that we're doing, but it's teaching that self-regulation is not there. Like, and I to be honest with you, that's something that I don't know. I don't know how to teach people that kind of self-regulation. I think it's something that we need to figure out, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like, I suppose self-regulation, it doesn't necessarily need to be a smack in the mouth, but being face to face with somebody, you pick up on the certain cues, but there's also your mind's working, how do I not elevate this to a certain degree unless I actually want to? Do you know that kind of thing? That social media, there's just not the mediation like that. And there is this like race to win the conversation, as it were.
Yes.
That's just how I see a lot of it, which, again, in real life plays out differently with, I don't know what you might want to call it, just natural justice, maybe. I don't know how you define it, but it's there. But I suppose the story you've just told about, the Reagan and O'Neill thing highlights to me, this is what people performatively ask for. They want this, let's get along together and what have you. Whereas their actions speak quite differently, as we're seeing played out,
Yes. A good example would be John Fetterman, and it just popped in my head. John Fetterman. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a senator in the United States. He's a Democrat. I mean, he's this tall, really tall guy, and he's probably the most oddest in terms of senators in history, because he dresses in average everyday clothes to half of the senator meetings. When he's met with Donald Trump, he's wore a hoodie, not a suit, not proper. But he's a Democrat and he's a moderate, and he goes, I don't see why if you want the president to fail, you want America to fail. And because he's done that and he said things like that, and there's a lot that he opposes the president on openly, not hidden behind the scenes, openly, but because he's tried to come to a middle spot with him, a lot of his own party is campaigning to get him unseated. And it's going, so you'd rather see America fall to its knees to prove a political point and see a president fail than you would rather seeing America succeed. And that system's got to break. It has to break. And if it doesn't break, it will be the start of the downfall of America being so dominant, because whether the people on the left or the right like it or not, we have to exist together.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Well, to bring it home then, if I can ask you, what should people be asking of politics or politicians or their own political view or of each other? What do you think? Yeah, what should we be looking at rather than what we are, do you think?
So this is something that I've really I'm glad we're bringing it home with this. So I've done a couple episodes with people running for office in America. One guy that really stands out in particular, and I feel like we're kind of a friend. His name's Chris Swanson, and he's a Democrat. But where I tell people is, don't look at the political talking points. Look at the thought process. And if you look at the thought process and how they're processing their words, how they're processing going about it, where does that lead them, right? Because I can sit here and tell you, hey, Lee, I'm going to get you affordable things. Okay, well, how? Yeah. Not just saying you're going to tax people. How does that process work? And do that. So like when I talk to people, I don't sit there and go, well, how are you going to oppose this? So what's your thought process on it? Like, how do you view it? Where are you going with it? So a case in point of, in my example of conversation with Chris, we had the George Floyd protests / riots in America 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever now. Well, he was the sheriff in a county called Genesee County. Well, there was a massive thing, all these protesters showing up to the sheriff's office where, he asked one of the pastors that he knew there, he goes, hey, how can we stop this from turning, riotous where people are going to get arrested and get hurt? And that pastor said, here's the mic, the loud phone or whatever. And he goes, you talk to them. And so he goes, hey, listen, we don't agree with how that cop handled the George Floyd situation. He went too far. After they're handcuffed, the training is they're supposed to get off, however you want to look at it. And all of a sudden, and he goes, we're going to lay our batons down. We're going to march with you that went too far. And in that county, Lee, that whole summer, they had nobody had to get arrested. Nothing got damaged. There was no major political violence of any sort. But what I liked, and here's where the nuance comes in. And this to me right here is the key. He goes, but to be fair, we were ready to arrest up to 1,000 people. But that wasn't the priority. The priority is how do we find a common ground? How do we find a spot where we can all talk about something we're upset about without going this far? And that's what stuck out to me. That's because that's how we start fixing problems. Don't have to agree with him saying that or doing that. But he was a law enforcement officer at the head sheriff of a county in a time where everybody was ready to lynch the cops. And he got these people to not turn violent. And it really set the precedent for the whole state of Michigan. We didn't really have any there was a couple situations where people were blocking the freeway, but nothing turned massively violent. There wasn't these massive, crazy situations going on. I'm sure you could probably point out the isolated pockets here or there, but it wasn't like you were seeing in the Minneapolises, the Portlands, the New Yorks. You didn't see that here because you had a lot of people here going, hey, we don't agree with what happened, but let's do it without destroying our own communities. That's what you have to look at. You have to look at that nuance. And if that politician, that leader's got that nuance, be willing to listen to them a little bit more. Be willing to pay attention. If all your politician does is spit out talking points, be alarmed. So I did a little episode on a guy running for governor here, and he's actually pulling the highest out of all the candidates on both sides. His name's John James. He has a lot of basic good ideas, but he's very vague on the talk. He's very vague on the nuances and the specifics.
Right.
And in the episode, I kind of said, hey, where's it at? And he, for the most part, has been absent at all the the platforms, the interviews where it's more than just him. Because if it's just him, he can control the conversation. If he's on a panel, well, now people can start challenging him. And that I've noticed he is absent from that. And to me, that's a red flag, and that's a red flag to the voters. And I'm not knocking him. He seems like a really good guy. He's a family man. He's ran successful businesses, but it's very concerning to me that you don't want to go
up his ideas.
Yeah. And those are the little nuances that people have to pick up on. But where people flock to him is he's very pro-Trump, this and that. So you got the mega crowd that's going, well, I love him just because he's that. And it's like, listen, if he's not willing to tell you how he's going to make your life better more than just that talking point, you should be scared.
Yeah, no, I love everything about that, what you've just said, just that looking a bit deeper. But that, I think for me, the willingness and the freedom to be able to talk about these things. I think, like you said about, Swanson, how just saying those few things just took the oxygen out of what was potentially a powder keg situation. Just by, that acknowledgement. And that to me, that sounds like the sort of guy you would like in a leadership role from things like that. Rather than, like you said, the one who throws out vox pops here and there, who's got the emotive statements, but potentially can't give the reasoning and the thought behind those statements. I love that. All right, well, again, as always, I have loved this conversation, but can I ask you, what's next for you? Where do people find your work, Joe?
Well, I'm pretty much on every major podcast platform, social media platform you can think of as I'm sitting here railing social media half the time. We got some new shows coming out starting next week. Feel free to check that out. I've had, if things like paid protesting seem to ring a bell with you, I encourage you to check out things like that. Check that out. It's something that has really helped the show. Again, we're the Middleground Mic. You can find us on every platform, really. We're really big on Apple Podcasts. For whatever reason, Apple Podcasts seems to really love us. We get listed on the directories there very fast. Spotify, it's because I'm small cookies. Sometimes, they don't seem to like me as much. But yeah, you can find us on all of that. And we got a lot of content, great content coming up. We got one with a media company, actually. The editor-in-chief of a small but growing news company that is going to be coming out. I don't want to drop it until, I send him the episode and he feels comfortable with it. But we got things like that coming out. I've got some more politicians lined up that are going to be coming out. Check that out. Feel free. People, try to be positive. Try to look at your neighbor and remember that he's human.
I love that. And again, I'll put links to all of these in the show notes and what have you. And I would urge anyone out there. I mean, your shows have got American politics, but I think it applies across the board. Like I said, I don't live in America. This is why, again, I take a lot of value from our conversations because I'm seeing how it plays out for you guys. But it's the same here in New Zealand, back home in the UK and what have you. It's a lot of the same issues repeating. And I'll come back to, like I said before, regardless of the divide or the side of the divide that you might place yourself on, we all want the same things. We all worry about the same things. We might disagree about how it's got to that state and how to rectify them. But ultimately, I think, like your message of connection through whatever possible means is a powerful one. So again, thank you, Joe. Thank you for the time you've spent. And always thank you for edifying me. I do love this.
No, thank you for having me on. I mean, I don't get too many invites to come on podcasts because, I'm not one of those guys out there saying burn the world down. So, people sometimes are not always the fan of that.
Yeah, but I think that's it. I do think there's a market for, again, the guy in the middle that's considering what's going on, rather than, I know our algorithms are driven. I might have to put some of the title in capital letters and use, incendiary language or whatever you to get those numbers.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I know how it goes. I get it.
But the content totally I think is incredibly valuable. I do I do love your work, and well, fuck it, it was listening to your work that's brought us to here today. So
Right.
I appreciate it.
And I
For whatever
appreciate
reason,
that.
I'm glad I happened across your podcast. So yeah, thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Lee. I appreciate everything.
Anytime, brother. And thank you again out there for listening. As always, you guys, you keep me coming back for more. For those of you that are either familiar with the show or are new to us, please look out for me on Instagram and TikTok under Social Harmony Talk and Facebook under Social Harmony Time to Talk, where I'll post show links in addition to being available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and now YouTube every Monday evening at 6 p.m. New Zealand time. So if I could ask you, please stick on a follow, put on a comment, like, share, all of those things. It really does, well, increase my reach, and I would appreciate you greatly. If you have a story to tell and you'd like to join me for a chat, please send me a message across the usual platforms and we can discuss a future episode. But for now, go well, look after yourselves, and keep talking. Thank you so much.